this way, when we display it on the thing, we can actually go over it without. Huh? All right. The book of Habakkuk. It is a minor prophet. Somebody tell me what the difference between a minor prophet and a major prophet is. What's that?
The books are shorter.
The books are shorter. That's the only difference. With a minor prophet, it's a shorter book. It usually is more focused in on one single topic, where like Daniel or Isaiah or Jeremiah has a whole lot of stuff in there. So before we get started, we're going to go a little bit about what the book is about the book. Life is about questions. And from time to time, we're going to ask why. Habakkuk was a man with questions, and his questions only could be answered by God. The queries of this prophet represent some of the most fundamental questions of our lives. See, the thing is, there's big questions. Now, if you think, if you pay attention and you think, there's going to be big questions in your mind about why am I here? What is my purpose? What is my end? What is right? What is wrong? Why is there wickedness? There's a lot of these kind of questions. And these kind of questions, the prophet is going to ask God. It's unique among all prophetic literature. It has a lot of Hebrew poetry, and it contains a dialogue between the prophet and the Lord. And the majority of the book is not necessarily God giving a judgment to Israel, to Judah. That's in there, but that's not the main point. The point is about who God is and about justice and how God is going to deal with injustice in the world. So, before we get started, though, we got to go through history. Other than David, who do you think would be one of the greatest good kings in Judah's history? Does anybody know?
Well, I get it confused, but I'm thinking Josiah.
Okay, Josiah's one. Anyone else? It's got an L at the end, but.
What?
Hezekiah, we're going to start at Hezekiah. He was one of the greatest kings that Judah knew. I mean, he was one of the greatest since David. He was a good king. He served God. He trusted the Lord. And there's not a whole lot of bad said about Hezekiah. He reigned for 29 years, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He tried really hard to stamp out idolatry. He pushed back wickedness. It got so bad at Hezekiah's day that the brazen serpent that Moses made and held up, they were worshiping it, and they made it into a god. Hezekiah had to take and break up and destroy that serpent because they had misplaced their allegiance. Instead of trusting in God, they were trusting in a piece of brass. It was a representation, but they didn't understand that. He was a good king. Unfortunately, good kings die. His son was a stinker. That's just about the best way. Manasseh was the longest reigning king in Judah's history. And he was the wickedest. He reigned for 55 years. That means if he started to reign the day I was born, he would still be reigning right now, because I'm going to say it this way. I'm only 55, though I catch young. He led Judah so far from God, it's not even funny. He pushed Israel, the nation further away than anyone else. So we had 29 years, about 30 years, and then 55 years. And how many years that added together? 80-ish, right? Ammon was Manasseh's son. Ammon was also a stinker. Now, Manasseh had a turnaround at the end of his life. If you read the Bible, you find out that he repented and he tried to do what's right there towards the end. God humbled him. But Ammon picked right up in his dad's own footsteps. He took the throne at 22, and he followed his dad, and he ruled for 2 years. And then he was bad enough, his own servants killed him. And then they put his son, Josiah, on the throne when Josiah was only 8 years old. Now the people got mad at the people who murdered Ammon, so they killed them too. And so what we see here is we have Hezekiah, high point. Manasseh, they're going downhill. Ammon, they're going downhill. They bring in Josiah, and Josiah, in 640 BC, Josiah ascended the throne. When he was 18 years old, he started to repair the temple. And if you remember, that we have one of those little cardboard books at the house that we got for the kids years ago. They're called Good Little King Josiah. Well, when this happened, he wasn't a good little king, but he was an adult. They came up to him and they said, Josiah, look what we found in the temple. It was a copy of God's law. The priest Hilkiah discovered the book, that some folks think it was the book of Deuteronomy, and read it to Josiah. And as he listened to the words of this book, Josiah realized things are wrong. God said to do this, and we're not doing it. And at the end of the book, there's these curses. It says, if you don't follow what I tell you to follow, if you follow after the people of the land, I will drum you out of the land. Don't think because you're my people, you get away from judgment. Remember that the Mosaic covenant, right, the people being in the land, was a conditional covenant. It was conditional on the people obeying God. When they didn't obey God, then that covenant would go away. When they obeyed God, God would give them victory over their enemies. One Israelite could chase over 100. That the animals of the land wouldn't bother them. They would have peace and prosperity. When they turned their back on God, then 100 of them would be chased by one enemy. The animals are going to attack them. Nothing's going to grow. God is going to punish them, and eventually God will spew them out of the land like he got sick of them, basically. Is what. And so Josiah heard this, and it cut him to the quick because he realized he's in charge. By the way, when you're in charge, you have a responsibility to affect your, whatever you're in charge of. Carrie's a supervisor. You have an obligation before God to perform that job in a godly manner. I'm a supervisor. I have to be fair. Even when I want to smack the lips off people, I have to be fair. I have to be righteous. I have to do things the way God says. I can't be arrogant. I have to be humble because God said to be. And what I'm saying is that all of us, whatever role that you have sovereignty over, even if it's just your house. If you only have a dog, you should not be kicking your dog because you're a Christian. And Christians supposed to act the right way. Josiah, being a man of God, saw that he was deficient and he started a revival. He did everything he could to turn back to God. And because of that, God postponed the fall of the land. Why are we talking about all these kings? We're going to get there in a second. It was a widespread revival. They celebrated Passover again. They dug up the bones of prophets and ground them up, and they polluted the places where they would offer up sacrifices to false gods. They did everything they could to say, we will not go back. At the time, the Assyrian Empire was fighting against the Babylonians, and the Assyrians were trying to run away, and Pharaoh Necho of Egypt was trying to help the Assyrians. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but Josiah felt like he needed to stand up against Necho. And he marched out there with his folks, and Josiah, good King Josiah, was murdered by the Pharaoh's army in Megiddo in 609 BC. After the death of Josiah, Judah fell into the hands of Egypt from 609 to 605. And because Egypt didn't want to have to mess with them, Egypt took one of his sons and elevated him to the kingship. Okay? Judah collapsed into rampant idolatry and oppression and horrible immorality and moral decay. The Babylonian Empire, the Bible calls them Chaldeans. We're going to read that in a minute. They sacked Nineveh in 612 BC. We read about that in another one of the prophets, didn't we? Then they defeated the Egypt in the battle of Carchemish in 605 BC. And so now they become the world superpower at that time. Jehoahaz reigned for 3 months after his dad died. That was the second, that's not the oldest boy, but it's one who rolled after Josiah. And then Egypt, came in and they installed his brother over top of him, which is Jehoiakim. He was a puppet. Now he switched his loyalty from Egypt to the Babylonians after Egypt's defeat. And then later he rebelled against the Babylonians, and there's all this thing that moved him off the throne, put somebody else on, and a whole bunch of junk right there, a bunch of drama. But I tell you that to know that at the time that Habakkuk was written was a time of confusion, of fear, of moral decadency. Judah had reached the epitome. There's a point of no return. If Evel Knievel is going to jump over the Grand Canyon, there's a certain point at which he can stop and not have to jump over the canyon. If you're in an airplane and you're going to be flying, you can abort the takeoff at a certain point. But after that point, if you try, you're going to run off the runway, right? The nation of Judah, under Manasseh and Ammon, had already reached the end of the ramp. And in the time, so Habakkuk was written in the days of Jehoiakim, who's the puppet king ruling under the hand of Babylon. The world of these Jews they're under oppression. Things are not right. There's wickedness all the way around. And into that, here comes Habakkuk. The book was written around 608 to 605 BC during the reign of Jehoiakim and Judah. Who were his contemporaries, Bob, who lived at the same time? What prophets lived at the same time? Which prophet, known as the weeping prophet? Jeremiah. He wrote both Jeremiah and the book of Lamentations. Ezekiel, Daniel, and Zephaniah all lived at the same time as Habakkuk. Well, think about it. Daniel was carried away when the Babylonian captivity. This is the eve of the Babylonian captivity. We're talking like just shortly before, like a few years before. We're talking like if the Babylonian captivity is the end of the Trump administration, you don't have a whole lot longer to go, right? So that is that's the context that we see this book. He prophesied during the final days of the Assyrian Empire, which carried away Israel into captivity. Remember that? And they were destroyed. We read about that. And Nahum, how God predicted that Nineveh was going to be destroyed. Nineveh is the capital of the Assyrian Empire. The beginning of the Babylonian world rulership under Nebuchadnezzar and his son Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Habakkuk, his name means embracer or wrestler. He's not mentioned anywhere else in the Bible. We don't know anything about him. We don't know about his parentage, where he came from. We don't know anything about him at all. And this book is not a prophecy for the people per se. It's a dialogue with Jehovah. The purpose of Habakkuk. It deals with the problem of understanding God's way. Or, as in the book of Isaiah, it says, my ways are not your ways, saith the Lord. My thoughts are not your thoughts. My thoughts and my ways are higher than your ways. And it's a dialogue between the prophet and God. Like, for instance, why does God allow injustice to prevail? Why does God allow the wicked Babylonians to punish the Judeans? How long is God going to allow evil to dominate the world? Why won't you do something about it, God? That's the questions. We kind of have those same kind of questions today. God, why is there wickedness? God, why do good people get killed and all this kind of stuff? Now, God doesn't directly answer him. Instead, God calls on the godly to have faith in one of the most fundamental quotes of the Bible. This quote is quoted a bunch of times in the New Testament, and we're going to get to there when we get to chapter 2, but you'll recognize it because it's in 3 different books in the New Testament. The themes of this is God's sovereignty, God's greatness, and God's hidden justice. So, when we look at our outline is pretty simple. We only have 3 points. Number 1 is the superscription. 1 verse gives you the who's writing and all that stuff. Then the prophet's perplexities. I love the alliteration here. The prophet is going to be asking some questions of God. He has a complaint from verses 2 to 4. Then God responds in 5 to 11. And that's as far as we're going to get tonight. And then the second complaint runs from verse 12 in chapter 1 to 2:1. And then God's second response. Then the prophet's prayer, a petition for God's mercy and praise to God's power. So that's pretty much the whole book. The theme is kind of simple, and it's actually a very interesting little book. And then the promise of God's sufficiency. I'm going to say this: whatever problem that you have, God is sufficient. When Paul had the thorn in the flesh, he says, "Thrice I asked God to remove this." God said, "My grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in your weakness." And this is something that Habakkuk understood in this. So, all right. Well, without further ado, Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 1. The burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see. Burden, or massa in Hebrew, it's often used in the context of judgment. It's something weighty or something heavy. And God's message to preachers and teachers are often heavy. If God has put you in a position of being a teacher, and listen, if you're a Christian, there's going to be a time when you're in a position to talk about God's word. Somebody's going to say, "Why did this happen? Why did that happen?" Or "What does that verse mean?" You have a burden as a Christian, because sometimes God's messages are not really fun and easy. You go up to somebody and say, "You're going to hell," they're going to smack you in the face thinking you're cussing them out. It's not fun to say that there is sin and all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. There is a burden. And as a preacher, I feel that burden every day. God has an obligation that I have to serve Him, whether I feel like it or not, whether I want to or not, whether it's easy or not, whether people are going to get mad at me or not, whether people turn their back and say, "You're not my friend anymore. I hate you." It doesn't matter. So the burden that came to Habakkuk is the same as that's all throughout time. God gives a message, and you have to preach it. The burden, we see, is not what Habakkuk's message and questions are, but it's God's answer. And if you notice that what he did see, the thing is he had a vision. It's significant. He didn't just hear a message or understand something intellectually. He saw a real vivid revelation of true prophecy. God pulled back the curtain of reality and let him see a future. He let him see something, and he let him see something you normally don't see. It's like in the book of Job, the first part of Job, God pulls back the curtain and you can see what's going on in heaven. And you can see that with the prophets. A lot of times God will pull back the curtain of future events and let's Nahum see what's going on. Let's Haggai see what's going to happen. And so what I'm saying is this is a vision. It's not just his thoughts. It's not just that. It's something God gave him. And by the way, the office of the prophet did not come as a birthright. There's no tribe of prophets. A prophet is someone who God decided he was going to reveal things to. And who that is who God pleased to. It could be this guy over here, this guy over there. They could be rich, they could be poor, they could be pretty, they could be ugly. It didn't really matter. God chose who the messenger is going to be. Today, we have an awful lot of mommy called and daddy sent preachers. We've got a lot of people who make the ministry into a vocation. It's not a vocation. It's not a job. It's an avocation. It is a mission that I'm on. And I honestly, listen, I'm going to tell you something, and I'm not saying this in a braggadocio way. I don't get paid to be your pastor. God called me to be here. And I firmly believe that if God calls me to serve Him, I serve Him regardless of what my financial benefit or lack thereof is. If this is a job, how long, Bobby, would you work at Kroger's if there was no paycheck?
No.
He said no.
He didn't say no. He's like, paycheck's gone, so was I.
He good time. He said, I'm out here.
A vocation, something that you do for a living, is all about the money. What I'm saying is, this prophet was called, and a real preacher is called of the Lord. And they serve God regardless. The Apostle Paul would work with his hands and make tents and support himself so that he would not have to rely upon the churches that he was serving. And he put himself in danger and he put himself out. And it wasn't about, somebody once told me, they said, well, at least you enjoy being a pastor. And I'm thinking, sometimes, I love the people, don't get me wrong, and God called me to do it, so there's an unction there. But sometimes, it's not fun getting up at 5 a.m. on a Sunday morning after being up every single day of the week. It's not fun going to work and then coming home. Not even coming home, coming straight to the church and then studying. I was studying until late last night, until like past midnight, just to try to get the lesson because I did not have time during the week to do it. And the thing is, it's not always fun. It's not always easy. And that's what the key is what I'm trying to get across. And once again, I'm not anything special. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, ooh, look how great I am. No. Listen, there's a whole lot of preachers who endured a whole lot worse times than I have. God has made my life pretty easy, just to be honest with you. I have stresses and problems, but God has made my life. He's provided for me time after time after time. I've not been in jail. I've not had been, there were a lot of preachers who had to walk around with bodyguards because people were trying to kill them. The fact of the matter is, I've had struggles, but I've had it pretty easy. But what my whole point, he didn't come to being a prophet because he chose to. The prophecy came to him. Real preachers are those who God called. You can't educate a preacher. You can take a preacher and educate him, but you can't make a preacher by educating a man. You understand what I'm saying? You can take somebody and teach them how to deliver a sermon, but that sermon is going to be a sermon that a man created rather than one that God gave him. God calls men to serve him, and when he does, it puts something inside of them that draws them to it. So, verse 2. First question. O Lord, how long shall I cry, and wilt thou not hear, and even cry out unto thee of the violence, and wilt thou not save? As the wicked son of Josiah is reigning, and the faithfulness to God is evaporating, Habakkuk is wrestling with what he sees as God's silence. He sees all this wickedness around him, and he's like, God, you're not doing nothing. This is the first question. He asked God, I see the wickedness around me. I see gross immorality. They disrespect you. They ignore your word. I'll tell you about it. I'll beg you to do something about it, and you don't do anything. How long are you going to ignore me, and how long are you going to ignore the situation? Psalms chapter 13 says the same kind of thing to the chief musician. How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Forever. How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? How long shall I take counsel of my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? This same question, God, how long? We hear this a lot of times, don't we? Have you ever felt that way? God, how much longer am I going to have to put up with this circumstance? This is what he was going through. You can look at Jeremiah. He said the same thing, Jeremiah 12. Righteous thou art, O Lord, when I plead with you, yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments. Wherefore doth the way of the wicked prosper? Wherefore are they all happy that deal very treacherously? It's like, God, I'm looking. Remember, Jeremiah is the same time as this guy. He's seeing the same rot and the same filth. And he's looking around. He's seeing all this stuff. And Jeremiah is saying, God, you're righteous. I know you're right. I'm not complaining about that. He says, but these guys are getting by with it. They're spitting in your face and they're getting by with it. They're happy. I'm miserable. I'm serving you. I'm being persecuted. They're dealing very treacherously and they're happy. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? You ever felt that way? And Micah, he says the same thing. The good man is perished out of the earth. There is none upright among men. They all lie in wait for blood. They all hunt every man his brother with a net. They that may do evil with both hands earnestly. The prince asketh, the judge asketh for a reward, and the great man, he uttereth his mischievous desires, so they wrap it up. The best of them is a briar, and the upright is sharper than the thorn hedge in the day of the watchman. And thy visitation cometh, now shall be their perplexity. Micah said the same thing. He said they're all corrupt. Every judge, every leader, everybody's got their hand out one little something for them to make the right judgment. It's the same kind of thing. We see that kind of stuff today. So verse 3, why dost thou show me iniquity and cause me to hold grievance? For spoiling and for violence are before me, and there are that rise up strife and contention. Here's the second question. First question is, how long, God, are you going to let this go on? Second is, why do you let me see this sin? God, I know what's right, I know what's wrong, and I see this horrible corruption all around me. I see it. I don't just hear about it from Sister Wagglemouth. I see it with my own eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you laugh right there. All around me is this corruption. There are 5 different words in this sentence talking about the corruption, talking about iniquity and grievance and spoiling and violence and contention. He's not just hearing about this stuff. He's witnessing it every day. And all the way around him, he's seeing this wickedness. And he's crying out to God. Saying, God, you're holy. This is what you said is right and wrong. Yet you're letting this go on. Why are you letting it happen? You're holy, God. Why don't you do something about the wickedness? Have you ever thought that? There's some people that say, God, you need to do something about the wickedness. And then when God does something about the wickedness, say, God, you're a big old meanie because you're doing something about the wickedness. Why doesn't God stop sin? I heard this one apologist look at somebody and said, would you be upset if he started with you? Verse 4. Therefore is the law slacked, and the judgment doth never go forth. For the wicked do compass about the righteous, therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. He says basically the cops are doing nothing, the judges are doing nothing, everybody's on the land. They don't care to enforce the law, they're not following God's law. There's injustice everywhere. The court system is corrupt, the rich buy their justice. The powerful oppress the poor. You come to court with a good case, but the guy you're suing is a rich guy or the friend of the judge. They throw your case out or just take your stuff. There is no justice, and it's just horrible at the time. Slack, the word slack there means to grow numb or feeble. The observance of God's law was not abolished. They still had God's law. They still kind of acted like that. It just grew numb. It just kind of withered away. It was paralyzed and unenforced. Remember, at this time, God's law was not just how we act towards Him. It was the law of the land. God's law was enforced by the king. In my office, we have a dress code. The dress code says you can't wear blue jeans. I don't enforce that. And everybody in my office wears blue jeans. That one law is kind of, and I do have the ability to kind of ignore that one, but that's fine. But my point is that they were treating God's law like that dress code. God commands that they have righteous judgment, that they shouldn't take bribes. That, listen, here's something we need to understand today. The way God wanted justice to be applied is that justice is applied regardless of who you are and whether you're rich or whether you're poor. If you're poor and you did something wrong, you got the penalty of your behavior. You didn't get a pass just because you were poor. If you were rich, you didn't get a pass because you were rich. God wanted true justice throughout the land. This is the crux of Habakkuk's complaint. The system is corrupt, religion's corrupt, everything's corrupt, and God, you're not doing anything about it. This is a picture of a nation in decline. And I see echoes of this exact thing today. I just heard about a situation where there were two different cardiologist offices next to each other. One of them was connected, the other one wasn't, and they didn't like the idea. The connected one didn't like the idea that another office, doctor's office, was next door to them, stealing their patients. So they had the city, through eminent domain, seize the other person's property, and they tore down the building and made it into a parking lot. Is that just? No, but that's what's going on here today in our country. We are seeing some of the same things going on here. And it's a mark of a decaying society, and they were right before the end. You understand? They can see the handwriting on the wall, so to speak. It's almost there. And under the Mosaic covenant, disobedience brought judgment, and they were going to be thrown out of the land. So verse number 5. Behold ye among the heathen and regard and wonder marvelously. So this is God's answer. He asked him these things here, and here's God's answer. Behold ye among the heathens and regard and wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your days which ye will not believe, though it be told to you. God says, okay, the heathen means Gentiles, and God's telling Habakkuk, he says, I'm going to do something. You're asking me if I'm going to do something about it. It's in the works right now, buddy. And what you need to do is you need to take your eyes off of the circumstance that's around you and look out to the Gentiles, because what's going to happen is going to surprise you. You're not wouldn't believe it if I told you. This exact verse, by the way, is quoted in Acts chapter 13:41. And it says, Behold ye despisers, that means Gentiles, and wonder and perish. For I work a work in your day, a work which ye shall no wise believe, though a man declare it unto you. Verse 6, God continues, For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land and possess dwelling places that are not theirs. He says, I'm going to do something, you're not going to believe it. I'm going to tell you, but you ain't going to believe it. The judgment is not going to come from within Israel. The judgment is going to come from without Israel. The judgments are going to come from the Chaldeans, the Babylonians. That's the ethnic group that's running Babylon at this time is called the Chaldeans. That bitter and hasty nation. Bitter means that these people are fierce, they're cruel, they're angry, and hasty means they're fast and they're rash. They're going to run in here, they're going to take it over, there's not going to be any stopping them. Jack Hyles preached on this verse. And what he preached is a warning on outside discipline. He said, if you do not discipline yourself, then God will impose discipline on you from the outside. If a church does not discipline itself, then God will discipline that church from the outside. If a nation doesn't discipline itself, it'll be disciplined from the outside. That's what this is saying. I'm raising up the Chaldeans. And Habakkuk is just smacking him in the face. Is what? They're worse than the people that you're judging, God. The Bible tells us that if we judge ourselves, we won't be judged. Did you realize? Do you remember that verse? It tells us that we need to examine ourselves. Listen, I'm your pastor. If somebody came in here in gross sin, and to the point it was so obvious, I would deal with it. I would have to deal with it. I would, in brokenheartedness and in tears, deal with it. But I'm going to tell you something. The most effective way of dealing with it is for the members who have problems to deal with their problems before it becomes a church problem. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to tell you this. You know the condition of your heart better than I do. My wife, I know the condition of my heart better than my wife knows the condition of my heart. Now, she can see a lot of things about me. She can watch my behavior. But I know the condition of my heart, and it's my responsibility to constantly look at myself and say, God, I'm not meeting up to your standard. Please forgive me. And I have to do that quite frequently. Verse number 7, they're terrible and dreadful. Their judgments and dignity shall proceed of themselves. He said they're terrible. That means they're inspiring terror. That's what terrible means. Something is terrible. It means it's so horrible it's going to cause fear and dread. They're nothing. They're dreadful. They're going to be overwhelming fear. They're going to bring judgment, and they're going to be a dignity. The irony is that the nation that's going to be coming in and judging are worse than the people they're judging, and Habakkuk must have been surprised there. Verse number 8, their horses are swifter than leopards, and are more fierce than the evening wolves. And their horsemen shall spread themselves, and their horsemen shall come from far. They shall fly as the eagle that hasteth to eat. Talk about shock and awe. They're going to roll through the land. You're not going to be able to stop them. They're going to be as aggressive as a starving wolf or as a starving eagle. If an eagle is hungry, they can fly pretty fast. And there's a little old mouse mousing around on the ground. Here comes the eagle. It's going to dive on it. Boom! No more mouse, right? That's what he's trying to say. Now, people say, oh, he's being poetic. He's not being poetic. This is an agrarian society. They were very familiar with these animals. And when he said they're going to be like the eagle, they're going to be like the wolf, and they're going to be like the leopard, they understood these animals. These animals are fierce. These animals are vicious. These animals are fast. And that's exactly what the Chaldeans are going to be when they come through. It's not going to be pleasant. It's not going to be just a passing boo-boo. It's going to be a big deal. They shall come for all violence. Their faces shall sup up the east wind, and they shall gather captivity as the sand. The east wind is a scorching, destructive desert wind. You remember we talked about it in Jonah chapter 4 when God sent that scorching east wind. He says it's better for me to die. That's what he's saying. He says it said that they're going to sup up, means they're going to consume or eat. He said they're going to be like that wind. They're going to be like the wind that comes and just devours everything. And they're going to gather captivity as the sand. In other words, everybody's going. There's not going to be just a rain. It's going to be total obliteration. This is going to happen. And they shall scoff at kings and princes and be a scorn unto them, and they shall deride every stronghold. They shall heap dust and take it. This is not just poetic. This is describing literally how they're going to take cities. We have a lot of documentation for the Babylonian Empire. And when they came up to a walled city, they just built a ramp of dirt to go over top of the city wall. That's exactly what they're talking about here. He says they're going to, all these princes and kings, they're going to just knock down the walls like it ain't nothing to them. It's like, that ain't nothing, buddy. You think you're somebody, you ain't nothing. He says they're going to mock them, they're going to move over past them. And the idea is that there's nothing that's going to stand in their way. Then verse 11, we'll stop here because next is going to be the second question. We don't have time for that. Then shall his mind change, and he shall pass over and offend, imputing that this power unto his God. So it says the Babylonians are going to come in. They're going to, once they conquer, it's God that gave them the ability to do this. God is using them as a cudgel to cudgel the people of God and the nations around. and yet they're going to say it's their God, which is either the God of Marduk or the God of Baal. They worship both. And they're going to impute that to God, and then they shall offend God. You notice this, offend? They're going to offend God. So the judge, the instrument of judging, is going to be judged themselves because they've offended God. So Habakkuk was like, we've got all this going on. God, when are you going to take care of it? God says, I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to take care of it. I'm sending judgment. It's in the offering right now. You're under the king that you're under because I've already set in motion the things that are going to take care of these problems. Israel, well, I say Israel to talk about all of it, but Judah especially, had to go through 80 years of captivity in Babylon in order to be cured of their idolatry and their wickedness. After they return to the land, they don't have any more problems with idolatry. God cured them of that. They have other problems, have other sins, and it gets pretty bad too. But God's going to cure them of it. But it took a whole thing. It took the Babylonian Empire coming. It had the loss of their kingdom. This is the last dying gasps of the Jewish kingdom. There's another little brief period in the intertestamental period where once they throw off the Greeks under Bobby, help me with his name. Antiochus Epiphanes. After they throw off Antiochus Epiphanes under Judah the Hammer, Maccabeus, they were independent for maybe about another 100 years, something like that, maybe 50 years. Then the Romans came in and